Good morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started. I am Ann Thomas. I am the lead on the LCAN grant series at Iowa College Aid. And I just want to welcome you and let you know how glad we are that you are here. We know there are a lot of Zoom meetings and conferences and trainings vying for your time and attention. And so we just really value your time and attention today. I want to let you know we are recording this for anyone that maybe can't join us in real time and wants to take a listen later. What we're going to talk about today is we're going to give you a little bit of background on Iowa College Aid and specifically on the Community Engagement Division. That is where the LCAN grant series lives at Iowa College Aid. We're going to talk to you about the LCAN model and also how LCANs apply collective impact to college attainment and to increasing college attainment in communities across Iowa. We'll give you a little bit of the theory and the tenets of collective impact and how the grant itself is structured. And we'll talk to you a little about the role of the ELCAN Coordinator. We have, I know, at least one ELCAN Coordinator with us today that's going to share a little bit of her experience. Couple of housekeeping items. We have built in some time at the end of the presentation for Q&A. And so you are muted. You have the power to unmute yourself, for the Q&A for any questions or comments. If you have questions or comments before then, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we will be moderating that and filtering it to whoever's speaking at that time. So I would like to hand it over to my colleague in LCAN Work, Megan Sybil. Megan serves as the primary contact to half of the LCANs across the state. She plays a key role in program development. She is also the lead on Iowa's College and Career Readiness Academy, which we will talk about a little bit here. And I want to share that Megan herself is an educator. She's a PhD in history and a history professor in her spare time. So at this time, I will hand it off to Megan.
Thanks so much, Ann, and thanks everyone for joining us this morning. As Ann said, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about Iowa College Aid as an agency, what we do, who we support, and so forth. And then I'm going to dive a little bit into the framework of collective impact, because to understand LCAN and the way in which the grant program works, it's helpful to have just a sense of what collective impact is and then how it then informs our LCAN grant series. First off, Iowa College Aid. For those who might not be familiar with our agency and what we do, you can see our mission, our motto, and our vision there on the screen. Really, the core of our work is the belief that college does change everything. We're a state of Iowa agency with a governor-appointed board of commissioners, and we're the only agency in Iowa that works across all sectors of higher ed, though as you'll see, particularly on the community engagement side, our work encompasses sort of the full spectrum of education in Iowa. I do also want to emphasize the ways in which we define college at Iowa College Aid. We're not just talking about the traditional four-year degree, though of course that is important. By college, we mean 2-year degrees, we mean trade schools, we mean credentials, we mean something earned after high school that will give, that sort of provides labor market value to the individual. So again, just something to sort of keep in mind. And it's also relevant to our LCAN work. A lot of our LCANs focus more broadly in terms of promoting access and success for students across the spectrum in terms of what college can look like. So yeah, that's just an important sort of element in terms of how we define ourselves. The way our agency is structured, as you can see here on this slide, we have sort of these goals within our different divisions in our agency. We look, of course, to be a trusted source of information. We want to increase and align resources around college access and success. And we develop and provide a variety of activities to meet those needs. Sort of on the exterior of this graphic, you can see that the main different divisions excuse me, within our agency. Upper left, research and communications. Our higher ed data research team has really grown in recent years. And this is something that we as an agency are looking to provide as a service to folks, to stakeholders in the state who work on issues around post-secondary access and success. Our communications team, of course, is another important piece of the Iowa College Aid puzzle, providing marketing and outreach and support to the rest of us within the agency. Financial aid and post-secondary registration deal with, on the one hand, scholarships and grants through the state of Iowa, pass through our agency, and then are sent out to students at Iowa colleges, universities, and so forth. Post-secondary registration team, any post-secondary organization looking to do business in the state of Iowa has to register through that team. At the, excuse me, at the bottom there, you see community engagement, which is where LCAN lives. This is where Ann and I sort of work out of. We also talk about, in terms of our community engagement team, our CE ecosystem. And really at the center for us is the student, right? This is where we sort of aim our efforts to provide supports so that all students in Iowa, you know, regular, traditional college age students, high school students, K-12, adult learners, we want to make sure we're providing access and supports to all of those individuals. And to do that, we really see this as a wraparound process where we're providing supports for staff, we're building capacity and engaging the collective community in these efforts. So our LCAN program really lives sort of in that sort of purple area around the edge, right, where we're engaging a range of stakeholders across the community to do all these things, ultimately with the aim of supporting our students. What programs do we have then in support of this work, right? LCANs, we're going to talk a lot about today, so I won't linger too much over those. Ann mentioned our Iowa College and Career Readiness Academy, which is another hat that I wear in terms of my own work. This provides professional development for a range of individuals working in college access and success, from school counselors to educators to administrators to folks in the post-secondary ed world. We currently offer 7 courses. And I'd be, you know, if there's any questions about that, I'd be happy to talk in more detail. Another key program within our community engagement division that really informs much of the work that we do is our Course to College program. So the 5 steps of college access, which are prepare, apply, finance, decide, and go, really structure the Course to College program. And our agency provides a range of supports. Excuse me, I've got a little bit of a cough today. Our Course to College program provides supports around these 5 steps to schools across the state. Iowa College Aid also houses the federal Gear Up Iowa program. Gear Up is currently in its last year of the current grant cycle, though Iowa College Aid is in the process of exploring another Gear Up grant. And it supports low-income school districts across the state, again, with the goal of increasing post-secondary access and success. We also, within our community engagement division, and some of our LCANs work closely with this team as well, we provide AmeriCorps access and success coaches. So these are AmeriCorps members, if you're familiar with the AmeriCorps program, members who can go in and do direct service with students, both in high schools and in community colleges or other colleges and universities, to really provide the supports, particularly around the first year as students transition from high school to college. So really taken as a whole, these are a multitude of ways in which our agency, through our community engagement division, supports college going in Iowa. From there, we're going to go ahead and drill down a little bit deeper into our LCAN model. Anna's going to talk in more detail later about, sort of the mechanics of the grant and so forth. But at a high level, we really want to emphasize just these sort of the core beliefs within our Iowa LCAN model. So we believe college access is one of the most effective and sustainable tools to encourage economic growth and fight poverty. And we have some specific elements that we focus on within that overarching belief structure, right? We want to build the capacity around college attainment in partnership with communities across Iowa through these three sort of areas that the grant itself focuses on. So providing funds to support the LCAN. We also provide targeted training, technical assistance and professional development, and our LCANs also have access to a statewide network to really foster learning and collaboration among our LCAN communities. So at a very high level, this is what our LCAN model seeks to do. To really get a full picture, though, of what that looks like, we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about collective impact and some sort of theory and sort of foundational terminology behind it, because that really does also inform our LCAN grant series as well. So first off, we want to define collective impact, right? But what is this? How do we define collective impact? What do we mean by it? So collective impact as a field, as it currently exists, really came into being back in 2011 with this article printed in the Stanford Social Innovation Review by John Kania and Mark Kramer. This type of work had been out there, right? This was just the first time that it had been sort of defined in the context of sort of academia. So collective impact, broadly framed, is a cross-sector collaborative approach to solving complex social problems. The core of collective impact is that we recognize that typically one-off programs that have a finite start and a finite end date aren't able to fully encompass and fully address these complex social problems. So collective impact can be applied to post-secondary access, like we at Iowa College Aid do through our LCAN grant program, but it's also something that can be applied to issues related to healthcare, related to homelessness. There's a whole range of collective impact initiatives in the United States and elsewhere that use this framework to address a variety of social problems. Importantly, this isn't just another, again, one-off program. It's really seeking to build systems change. It's seeking to connect and align existing programs in a way that hopefully will get to a point where it can address fully these longer term, more complex problems that one-off programs typically just aren't able to manage. So how does collective impact connect to LCANs, right? So LCANs are collective impact efforts working to improve college access and success within communities across Iowa. Again, our definition of college is really crucial here because many of our LCANs do support a variety of pathways to college access and success, in addition to the traditional four-year degree, right? So we really want to make sure that that is elevated and emphasized throughout this process. So continuing on with kind of our discussion of collective impact and what that looks like, we want to provide some guidance around how you sort of gauge or how you evaluate if your community is potentially at a point where you might consider applying for a grant and embarking on the LCAN grant program and delving into the collective impact process. So there are broadly defined 3 preconditions for a collective impact initiative: identifying champions, having financial resources available, and an urgency for change being present in the community. So we would really ask you to sort of ask yourselves, ask anyone in the community who might be potentially interested in working on this initiative, ask yourself, do you have champions of post-secondary ed attainment in workforce development ready to sort of lead the charge in your community? In terms of financial resources, yes, there's the LCAN grant, but we also ask for match from communities. And we also see collective impact in LCANs as a long-term investment for communities. So ultimately, you know, after the grant cycle expires, there's going to need to be conversations around long-term sustainability. And we want to make sure that communities are aware of that and are thinking about it well in advance of the end of the life of the grant. And finally, in terms of urgency for change, we would want you to sort of have the conversation within your community. You know, does our community need, you know, highly educated individuals or a skilled, trained workforce? Is there urgency in our community around post-secondary ed attainment and everything else that sort of goes along with that? Is there that need there? Is there that desire to really support these issues and work towards change? If the answer to those are yes, then you have the sort of the preconditions in place for embarking on a collective impact initiative. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into these three preconditions and talk a little bit more about what they mean, what you should be thinking about while assessing whether or not this is something that you'd like to explore. So by influential champions, the sectors that we would like to see represented from sort of your champions in your community are what you see here on the slides. So typically our LCAN leadership teams come from individuals, come from champions from these different sectors who have a vested stake in seeing post-secondary attainment increase in their community. So K-12 schools, right? Representatives from higher ed, from the nonprofit world, from business and government, from philanthropy, and any other groups in your community that might be interested in having a seat at the table. This could be labor, this could be research, this could be media. It can look different depending on, of course, your specific community. But it's important that everyone at the table, that all of these influential champions that would be involved in sort of getting the momentum moving, particularly in the beginning, have a stake in increasing post-secondary ed attainment in the community. Typically, these are going to be sort of higher level CEO folks who have the capacity and the ability to devote sort of resources and time to the collective impact effort and really be able to lead the charge around these issues. And I would also say to make sure that others in the community see their efforts and would be interested and inspired to join them as well. So financial resources, another precondition that we wanted to talk about in a bit more detail. So the conversation here would be what matching funds in the community would be in existence that would be able to be committed to this effort. Grantees, if you know your community would apply successfully for a grant, there is match required each year of the life of the grant, and ultimately, again, for the work to be sustained over the long term, financial sustainability is something that's going to have to be baked into the LCAN itself. So having those conversations early and often, and being aware that this is something that that the LCAN will have to sort of grapple with and have conversations around in the long term. You know, if you have those early and often, that will sort of set you up for that success. And then in terms of urgency for change, this is really, again, just wanting to make sure that your community, if you're looking to apply for an LCAN grant, to make sure that this is something that the community is ready to get on board with, that this is an opportunity for the community to take advantage of, and that what's been done in the past around post-secondary ed attainment maybe hasn't worked, and that a new approach is needed. Again, that's something that needs to be in place really for these initiatives to ultimately be successful. So we've talked about the preconditions, right? This next slide gives an overview of what we call the 5 conditions of collective impact. So, Anne, can we go to the next slide? There we go, thank you. So I'm not gonna talk in detail about these, but again, to the point of sort of the terminology of collective impact, these are our terms, these are ideas that are built into the grant process itself. So for example, to take the first one on the left there, the common agenda, this is a deliverable of the grant. This is something that the ELCAN team will be working on through the course of doing the ELCAN grant. Shared measurement, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous improvement, and backbone support infrastructure. These are all elements of collective impact and the ELCAN grant that we provide support and training around, and that the ELCAN team ultimately engages in as part of the ELCAN grant program and process itself. We also wanted to make available to you, and we'll share the slide deck out with attendees today. If you are wanting more and just wanting to get a sense of, okay, so what does this actually look like in practice? This slide has a couple of videos that showcase individual ELCAN efforts and how collective impact structures their work. There's one from Attainment here in Iowa, of course, and the Michigan College Access Network, which really sort of wrote the book in a lot of ways on applying collective impact to college access. We have a video from them included here as well. So we would, again, encourage you to take a look at those if you're wanting to see more kind of collective impact and ELCAN work in practice. Finally, I would just leave you, before I hand it off to Anne, leave you with the thought that collective impact is long-term work. The grant series itself is 4 years, but in terms of, you know, potentially seeing population level outcome changes, it's much longer than that, right? So this is work that takes commitment, that takes a recognition of this being a long-term process. It's not a quick fix, but certainly going in that direction together as a community, we're hopeful that our ELCAN grantees find success. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anne.
Thanks, Megan. So I'm going to talk a little bit about ELCANs and how the collective impact steps or the conditions are embedded in the ELCAN grant series itself. When a community applies for an ELCAN grant, part of what we are looking for and part of the reasons that we ask for what we do with the application is to see if those preconditions that Megan talked about are in place. And then over the course of the grant series, the community is tasked with sort of building those collective impact conditions. And so, you know, the steps go in order. So the deliverables of this multi-year grant are built around those steps. And then when you're applying for your next year, it's basically based on meeting the deliverables of the subsequent year. So that's to satisfy the grant, but it's also to truly embed this initiative in your community so that it is there, you know, after the life of the grant. I want to give you a little bit of an overview of the collective impact steps by grant year. So these are essentially the deliverables. The ELCAN grant series itself is a 4-year grant. And so there is a reapplication process every year, but the eligibility is based on meeting the deliverables of the previous year. And so in the first year, we want to make sure that the ELCAN is hiring that ELCAN coordinator. We invest a large portion of our funds in that position because we believe strongly that having that position is really key to keeping this initiative moving forward. In year one, the community is establishing their ELCAN structure, or, you know, organizational chart, you might say. And convening that leadership team, building up that leadership team roster of cross-sector, you know, CEO level leaders. They're identifying their SMART goals. And so part of collective impact is that this leadership team is tasked with identifying what are the barriers to college attainment specific to our community, and then what goals do we need to establish to help alleviate those barriers and thus increase college attainment. This is a very data-driven process. So We want to ensure that goals are being built around data and not just anecdotal information. And then in year one, those priorities are being set for year two. In year two, the leadership team is creating a common agenda, which basically is a statement of what those goals are, what the ELCAN is about. It's a statement to the community. And we also want leadership team members to be visible in that common agenda. So, having a place to sign off on that, not just for the leadership team member, but for their home organization, because we really want this to be built in to partner organizations. So it's not just the individual people at the table, but it's the organizations that they represent that are committing to be a part of this work. In year two, a data dashboard is built, and that is basically a public-facing site where someone in the community can go and see, these are the goals around college attainment that the ELCAN is working on, and then see if are they making progress, are they moving the needle on these initiatives, and then work groups are formed around the priorities that are based on those SMART goals. So this is where you really get to kind of in year two, the sort of boots on the ground work, because you're actually building some teams that are doing work around those goals. And then we talk early and often about continuous improvement and sustainability to ensure that things continue to run smoothly and continue to function throughout the grant and beyond. In year three, the ELCAN is working on revising a resource map, which is something that is submitted with the application. It's basically a landscape of, what resources exist in your community, because this grant is not about building new programs. It's about taking a look at the programs that exist and aligning them and leveraging them to reach your goals. And then also revising that data dashboard. We do ask for a report out on those work group initiatives. And then continuing to build on that continuous improvement and sustainability plan. And year four is a lot of revising and continuing to develop, because, in this grant series, you're continuing to revise and remodel things all the time. And then assessing that continuous improvement and sustainability plan, and telling us a little bit about what's your plan for year five and beyond, after the life of the grant. I want to take some time to talk about the ELCAN Coordinator. The ELCAN Coordinator is a dedicated staff person that keeps stakeholders flying forward and flying in the same direction. And like I said, we really believe strongly that this is a key to success for any ELCAN. As a best practice, we recommend having a full-time coordinator, but we also fund positions for several very talented part-time coordinators. There are a lot of collaborations and task forces out there. Some of you may already be a part of those or have been asked to be a part of that. We really feel strongly that having the dedicated staff person is what is one of the key differences between this type of initiative and a task force, because it's really that person behind the scenes that's keeping the communication going, keeping the momentum going, and making sure that they're, those efforts are aligned. So this is just a little bit about the different roles and responsibilities of a coordinator. Obviously, the primary job is to coordinate the work of the ELCAN. In the interest of time, I'm going to zoom ahead here to the competencies. These are basically the 10 competencies that we believe an ELCAN coordinator needs to have. So these are things to be thinking about if you're writing a job description for a coordinator and seeking candidates. It's also what we use to build out the training that we provide. Iowa College Aid provides training. We also do peer-to-peer training, and we're working to build more of an intentional mentoring program across the state between coordinators. And then we also fund training for coordinators to go, to regional and national and international even conferences. Obviously not a whole lot of travel happening right now, but there are still a lot of really excellent national trainings being offered around collective impact. This is a map of the LCANs that currently exist in the state. This is coming across a little bit tiny, but you can kind of see that we're spread out all over the state. We are always looking to do more to support Southwest Iowa, because we do have a little bit of a gap there. And so one thing I want to point out is that we fund really two different types of LCANs. There are LCANs that are, you know, geographically based, and then there are LCANs that focus on a certain population across the state. And our geographically based LCANs, it is the applicant and then the leadership team that determines, you know, what exactly is the purview of the LCAN. So it's a little different than some other state grants where we're not telling you that you have to serve like a certain school district or a certain county, because we feel like you all know culturally what makes sense based on how the school districts are structured, where people live and work. And so that's really something that we leave up to the applicant to determine. I am going to turn it over now for a little bit to Jeanette Sink, who is the coordinator of Mason City CAN, otherwise known as MC CAN. So Jeanette, if you want to unmute yourself and just share a little bit about MC CAN.
Oh, thank you, Anne. As Anne said, I am Jeanette Sink, project coordinator for Mason City CAN, and I have been doing it for almost 4 years. Although our organization has been together since 2015, and we are currently in a 3rd year of the LCAN grant series. We went back to the beginning a couple years ago when we decided to add in adult learners. So we have been doing this for many years. Currently, we have 20 leadership team members, and 12 or 13 of them are our original members from 2015. So we've had really long sustaining members and been able to do a lot of things within our community. So I'll start with some things that we've done in our high schools. We early on surveyed students to find out, you know, what they really needed, you know, as far as information and support, and found out that they felt the community, you know, didn't really care about them, and that they didn't understand what opportunities lied for them in the future. So some of the things that we have done are mock interviews for our sophomores, and we're going on to our 4th year of doing that. And this year will be our first virtual year. So it's going to be exciting and a new challenge for us, but it's a week-long training that we do in English class, where we teach them soft skills and then provide them career exploration and experience with interviewing process. And this involves so many people and such a huge collaboration, over 60 volunteers throughout the week that, you know, come and help with this to, you know, support our students. And it really helps them, give them confidence as they move into their future and what they want to do and what they know the opportunities are out there for them. Another one that we're doing is something new because we decided we needed to start earlier. We're working on an all-school college and career day for the high school at Mason City. So that is all-inclusive, every student within the high school. It's an all-day event where they all do something college or career related all day long, including pre-ACT testing that some students may not otherwise have an opportunity to do, and then college and business tours, which, you know, offers community support and then helps get our businesses involved and really shares with the students, you know, what locally we have to offer. So it's a huge community event for everyone here. We also celebrate Decision Day, which is just celebrating all the graduates and their plans for their future. Last year, because of COVID, we were unable to do that in person. So we were able to reallocate funds and help with virtual presentations. And then we also purchased yard signs for every single senior in our community to help celebrate their graduation and then just continue to show the community support. We also worked with Iowa College Aid to get an AmeriCorps into the Mason City High School, which was a huge, huge accomplishment and source of assistance, because they helped with FAFSA completion and, you know, obviously then college attainment, because we know that FAFSA completion increases college enrollment. So we're currently looking for another one to replace the one that we had, but I know that it definitely was successful. So, and I mentioned earlier about being flexible. Obviously, because of the pandemic, there were several of our projects and programs that were unable to happen last year, and we were able to reallocate funds to support a need for the local school food pantry, which had increased in need, like it quadrupled. So we were able to help support that in their need and help feed students throughout the summer. So and then the other thing I mentioned earlier was that we started looking at our adult learners, and we weren't sure how many were out there or what barriers existed. So we hosted an adult learner summit and brought together members of the community that dealt with, you know, our 25 years and older community members, to see if there was any data that existed to tell us what barriers they had. And we found that there weren't very many. So we created a survey and had over 540 responses to that community survey, and learned that childcare and financial assistance were obvious sources of barriers that kept people from furthering their education. So we're continuing to work on how we can help our adult learners in the area. Most recently, we came together to find out all of the local assistance that there is for free FAFSA, to help with FAFSA completions. And we produced a video and provided a one-page flyer that we shared with businesses and parents and schools, so that everybody knew if they were struggling and needed help, that there was help available. So I'm continually amazed by what our community can do when they come together around the shared agenda and goals. And I know that the impact we're having on our students is invaluable.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. It's inspiring to hear you talk about what's happening in your community, and like you mentioned, you know, the power of what happens when everybody gets behind a common goal. So thank you very much. I am going to touch on the LCAN grant application cycle. I see a question from Christy about the coordinator role, and the short answer to that question is that is, you know, once the grant is over, the coordinator position, basically the LCAN is tasked with deciding what is going to happen after the life of the grant. So that's part of why we have those discussions early and often. And what we have seen is that, you know, I'm thinking of one community in particular where a partner organization stepped up and agreed to partially fund the position. So those conversations about how the position is going to be funded after the grant, where it's going to be housed, or, you know, is the LCAN going to try to function without a coordinator after the life of the grant? Those are all conversations that are had sort of over the course of those 4 years. I want to show you where you can find the LCAN grant calendar. So this is, you can find this on our website as well, but so, you know, we're having the webinar today. We are going to have a grant writing workshop February 25th, which I will talk about more a little later. And then our RFP opens up April 1st, and the application cycle begins May 1st. One thing that I want to emphasize, you know, we shared sort of where LCANs exist locally across the state, and then that we have the 3 statewide LCANs that focus on traditionally underserved populations. So right now we have an LCAN that focuses on the queer community. We have an LCAN that focuses on the Latino community. And then we have an LCAN that focuses on system-involved youth, specifically students that are aging out of the foster care system. And so as far as new applications, we are really looking to fund LCANs in parts of the state where there is not a collective impact initiative around college attainment, or that focuses on a traditionally underserved population that is not yet represented by our LCANs. We really, part of why we had this session is because we really want people to know about LCAN and where it exists in the state, because you may be next to an LCAN and you might want to get in touch with the coordinator and find out how you can partner and kind of align yourself with that work. And so if you are interested in learning more about how you can partner with an LCAN in your community, shoot Megan or I an email. I will put our email information up at the end here, and we can get you in touch with a coordinator near you. The grant period is on the state fiscal year, so it runs from July to June. A little more about the LCAN grant structure. Megan referenced the match. You can see there that there's a 25% match requirement in the first 2 years, and then it goes up to 50% in the last 2 years as you're moving, towards sustainability. We don't currently require any amount of that to be cash. It can be cash or in kind, but we want you to keep in mind that sustainability piece. So that might mean, that you need to up your cash match a little bit as you get to year 3 and 4. It really depends on a little bit what sustainability means to you and what the LCAN is going to look like after the life of the grant. We offer, we don't give you an exact amount or cap. What we say is that we are looking to fund within a $50,000 range. What does the grant fund? So our funding priorities, again, number one is that coordinator position. We really believe in embedding that position with this grant. We also fund travel and training, and like I said, there's not a lot of travel happening right now, but there is still a lot of training. There is an excellent collective impact conference that is coming up this spring that we are going to be paying for some coordinators and leadership team members to attend. Materials and supplies. So we do fund materials and supplies around promotional materials. Food used to be a big thing for meetings. It's not so much of a thing anymore, but any materials and supplies associated with running the LCAN or with conducting outreach to the community. Contracted services. So we do have a couple of coordinators that are supported through a contract versus being an employee of an organization. We also have paid for contracted services for websites, marketing, research, things of that nature. And then we do support a certain percentage of indirect costs with this grant. So we kind of did high-level stuff about the grant itself because we wanted to give you more background around LCAN and collective impact. If after hearing all of this, you are thinking, I want to move forward with getting a team together to apply for a grant in my community, we are hosting an LCAN grant workshop on Thursday, February 25th at 9 a.m. If you are interested in that, we will make information available on our website, but also please, email us directly because we'd love to hear from you and get a sense of who might be interested in applying this year. So here is our contact information. Christina Sabui, who is on the call, is the director of the Community Engagement Division, all those programs that Megan told you about. And then my information and Megan's information is here as well. And at that point, we've talked at you for quite a while. I'd like to open it up for questions or comments. You can continue to use the chat or just unmute yourself. If there aren't any questions or comments, I just want to thank you for your time again. We hope that this was beneficial to you and you learned something today. And we just thank you very much for all of your efforts in the education field across Iowa. We know that everybody is facing challenges and working to overcome them every day for our students. So thank you very much.
And this is Jason Anderson from Northwest Iowa Community College.
Hi.
I do have one question. We have a group of different entities looking at a partnership. And I'm wondering if you could talk about how that works. Do you see one group being the lead? Do you prefer that application coming from one organization?
That's an excellent question. And I kind of realized as I was talking, we didn't really get into that. We will talk a little more about it at the grant application workshop, but what needs to happen is that you would have to identify a fiscal agent for the grant. So the application itself is a collaborative process. The fiscal agent is responsible for administering the grant. A lot of times the fiscal agent is the entity that houses the coordinator, for lack of a better word, and then also takes care of the financial aspect. So submitting claims for reimbursement and things of that nature. So that would be one of the first steps, I think, is well, first bringing together, your stakeholders, and then talking about who might best serve as that fiscal agent. Does that answer your question?
Very much, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? If not, thank you very much, and have a great rest of your week, everybody.